Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and while the gauntlet has just now begun, I was working on this volatile dead SpellSlinger just before it started, and got pretty deep into its process, about level 93 I think, and the concept was to just basically bring SpellSlinger back to some regard, and use Volatile Dead. So kind of like one of the old meta builds where you'd either have some Poet's Pen or Spellslinger and sling corpses with also Volatile Deads going all over the map. And it still holds up pretty well to this day. This is a Trickster. I'm using Eternity Shroud, so it's an item I love using, but don't really get to use it often enough, and it's not a terrific use here. It's basically just adding a bunch of extra chaos on top of the fire that we start out with, and then also as a Trickster we're harnessing the void, which is the ascendancy that gives a bunch of extra chaos off of non-chaos damage. So that means that with full Eternity Shroud shaped gear we have a decent amount of chaos. About half my damage is probably chaos, and then the enemies have no chaos res since it's all shaped gear. And then a bunch of damage is fire, I suppose, as well. And a little bit of lightning for good measure. And then recently I also added a Glacial Cascade in the setup with a Cast on Crit attached to Frenzy, so that it pumps a bit of extra freeze and initial damage, so you don't necessarily have to just wait for the Volatile Deads to be doing their thing. So the way Volatile Dead works, if you're somehow unaware, you have some corpses, you use Volatile Dead, it consumes those corpses, it spawns some balls, and then those balls go on a heat-seeking mission to destroy things. It will spawn based off of the corpse amount, the spell cascade, so at any one time you can get like 12 of them out or something per cast, with the helmet chart I think, and it isn't a projectile. It doesn't get affected by minion stuff either, so the only thing that affects the movement speed of it is an alt quality for 20% extra movement speed, and you could stack the alt qual on that if you really wanted to go even faster. But the real take-home message is Spellslinger is still pretty damn viable. People just aren't too happy with having to reserve more mana for it, and that does take away from, otherwise having to build some defenses or some shit, because conventionally you're still kind of wanting at least one defensive aura, like an offensive aura, whereas fitting in Spellslinger setups is pretty tough to also do defensive setups or other offensive setups too. But you don't really need them, because Spellslinger itself is going to be the offensive setups, and it still has that real ease of use where you can basically pre-fire or generate spells without having to hit anything. So it's kind of like a cast on crit setup, but gonna yield less during a fight, but yield more before a fight. So it's got some trade-offs and all of that, but you can still build some very thick and spicy Spellslinger setups. I did one a couple leagues ago, and it was just before Spellslinger was buffed, and I was very happy with that outcome. I've yet to do a Spellslinger since then, but it's this is the first attempt with just some sort of meme level of build, I suppose, and it still holds up really well. I think you can do plenty of setups and plenty of different spells and ascendancies and gear building routes. This is but one example, and Volatile Dead's not something you see too much of these days, still holds up well too. By level 93 I have yet to die to anything meaningful. Just died once, I think, to some mistake, like a reflect map or some shit like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was not what you would call a real, build resulting death, something like that. So it's been pretty good building around the Trickster on kill, life, energy shield, and as well as that I've got energy shield overleach, I've got a bunch of evasion, I've got ghost shrouds, so it does end up being a bit thicker than it otherwise would look, but it's not going to take too many hits. It's just, that's the idea, it won't ever really be taking too many hits. Capped on spell suppress as well, and yeah, yields a pretty nice play style where you can run and gun, and there's a bit of a delay on the initial damage, but that doesn't really matter too much in the grand scheme of things, and it actually should be a pretty damn good playstyle for Sanctums. It has been, but I mean more in the regards that it might end up being able to do a no-hit run, because you can just like kind of sit back and pre-fire and do a whole bunch of safe damage dealing. So if I can get back onto the character at some point, given that it's now some sort of meme gauntlet build time for myself, I'll have another endgame update video. For now, it went real well, and I've had just one quick boss example, and single targets looking maybe something like 20 to 30 million DPS. So there's still potential, there's still promise for the end game, but it's been pretty good so far. And let me go ahead and show you how I've built it. So here's our current character level 93 Peepo Pondering Eternity. Just an emote looking over Eternity, and since I'm using an Eternity Shroud and I had very little idea of how exactly I wanted to build this character, there was a lot of pondering to do, and it was still fairly confusing, figuring a lot of things out: defenses, offenses, reserves, damage scaling, all of that. It's just a replica, not a replica, it's a foil Voidborn, version, so it costs a bit more money, does nothing extra. Double corrupted it, got nothing that I actually needed, so it's just a basic Eternity Shroud, nothing too special going on there. So with SpellSlinger, you do kind of want a bit of flat damage on your wand. Supported skills have added spell damage equal to 174% of damage of equipped wand. So it's basically Battle Mage, and you do kind of want to go some flat damage scaling route. So I think the recent buff to SpellSlinger was increasing the amount of damage you get from your wand to the spells, and I made a successful enough SpellSlinger pre those buffs with that type of a setup, and just leaned a bit more heavily into it this time around. So a bunch of fire, bunch of lightning, bit of Elia's Chaos, since with Eternity Shroud you do get a lot of Elia's Chaos, and then more Chaos is more Chaos, and you'll ignore enemy Chaos res. Then finished off the suffixes, just chased it down with Essence Rolling till I got something nice, and ended up hitting a good flat early damages Chaos, and then finished off suffixes with prefix cannot be changed, Veil, and got ourselves this guy. So you can see currently that the damage spread there, decent bit of lightning, that's coming just entirely from the wand, a lot of fire damage, a lot of Chaos damage, bit of fizz as well, which is once again from the wand. The then real big thing, basically just getting shaped everything, so you can't do anything too special unique wise unless it's really difficult to get that unique, and you can't do Eldritch Implicits, which does kind of suck these days, and I'd say that's probably why Eternity Shroud isn't as played at the moment anymore, because getting the right uniques is pretty damn difficult, and then also Eldritch Implicits are pretty powerful and tough to look past. But the only particularly special thing we're running is basically the hat. So it's one of these pseudo 6, 7, 8 link hats that we just, by default, to make good use of a hat like this, you need basically a 6 link, and we're talking Hypothermia plus more elemental damage, which is a Hysteria, I think it is. Horror Essence, Essence of Horror. So Essence of Horror is 30 elemental damage. Hypothermia is going to be almost 30 damage as long as things get chilled, and that makes it basically a 6 link, and the benefit of that over a regular 6 link is that the 30% more elemental damage is still a really good link, but it doesn't take any extra mana or reservation, so it's still being acted on as a 5 link, and then the socketed spells have 3 crit is a really big bonus. Once again, if you're going to use a crit gem, it's saving you that extra link, and then turning this into a 7 link. So to make this thing, it was actually a bit painful because I got fairly unlucky. So you grab Essences of Horror and just spam until you get Hypothermia. Ideally, you'll have a spare suffix in the end. If you don't, you basically have to annul or suffix to prefix to get rid of that spare suffix. So once you've isolated just Morelli and Hypothermia, you do lock suffixes and then reroll crit with Harvest. You then basically either get 1, 2, or 3 socketed spell crit, end up landing 3 on the first try, but it took me like damn near 100 essences of horror to actually isolate just those 2 mods. I kept getting hypothermia with a 3rd mod, or getting all the other gem level rolls instead of hypothermia, so I didn't see it as often as I would like. So this helm, which should have been cheaper, I think, ended up costing me something like 20 to 30 divines. The socketed spells is nice, but previous build I did it with just a regular hypothermia early damage hat, and that's not a big deal. But in this case, the way I built this character, it was tough to get crit, so getting the extra crit there is actually pretty useful. You can then just keep prefixes, keep suffixes, and unveil until you get like 2 additional area if you want to go down that route as well. When I did that, it filled up the prefixes, and I didn't want to have to go annulling or anything like that, so we're just leaving it the way it is. So in the hat here we have Volatile Dead, the Divergent version, Spell Cascade, SpellSlinger, and Inspiration. So you can see with our current setup, we have Desecrate, SpellSlinger, and Cascade. So one is going to be doing SpellSlinger for Desecrate, the other is going to be Volatile Dead, and they do both go at the same time, but for the first cast you don't have corpses down, so SpellSlinger and Volatile Dead doesn't work unless you put in Barrage and then both of them trigger at the same time, but you need really good attack speed, and it's a bit of a different feel anyway. I think this is currently a nice enough setup, but still figuring out the overall links. So the links here are Frenzy, Cascade, Cold to Fire, Cast on Crit, Crit Strikes, and Faster Attacks. And you can use the Frenzy as just pure utility, no need to do a Cast on Crit, but I did that and there wasn't too much else going on, and I thought I could fit in an extra Cast on Crit, so I decided to. It doesn't do too much damage. If I can calculate my DPS well enough, the Volatile Deads are probably about 20 million, and the Cascade is maybe like 2 to 3 million DPS. So it's not like it's doing too much, but it is helping the hypothermia go, and a little bit of extra damage. So that's the current setup there, but it could be anything, and I probably will try out some other things as well, like a Frostbolt or a Freezing Pulse. I like the idea of the cold thing to freeze, shatter, and chill, and then also Cold to Fire so that we get extra value out of the Eternity Shroud. So besides that, we are using Mark of the Shaper, so I had to grab a Shaper and an Elder Ring, smash them together with the crit multi and the life gain hit, landed this thing. Nothing too special, but we do want a Elder Ring on our other ring slot, and since it's Elder and Shaper, it gets both benefits of this these mods here. Just used essences, I think, of Scorn to land something on this amulet. It was basically just going for life, but ended up getting some other stuff too. Some minus mana cost helps sustain our mana. I am sustaining mana through a bunch of mana regen, clarity, and then also some minus mana cost, and the Watch Your Eye mod for clarity as well. Dense spam on some shaped gloves to land perfect prefixes in the end. Lock prefixes, unveil, got those. Boots, very basic, just essence spam until I got a suppress roll. Also ended up getting a additional res roll on it, lock suffixes, and then unveil once again. Very basic belt, just use chaos harvest craft until some good shit happened. And then a shield. This one was caster reroll, I believe, off of the harvest bench. So it made a bunch of different good shields with just using caster rerolls on the harvest bench. Buy a lot of blue juice and then just spam away. And this one has a bit of reservation and then also some damage and stuff. And currently, I don't think that reservation even matters. I've got more than I actually need to at the moment. My mana probably only really needs to be at about 60 or 70 unreserved, but this is what we're currently at. So the tree has been a bit of a headache for me, just figuring out the optimal sort of setup, and I'm pretty sure it's still somehow wrong. Like a cluster is probably going to be better, dropping some stuff is going to be better. Trickster has been a difficult sort of way to build this character. I would have usually done something like this on like an Inquisitor for a bunch of crit, an Elementalist for a bunch of crit as well, potentially. Or you could go the corpse scaling method for Volatile Dead with a Necromancer. Some shit like that. But I went Trickster because I like the idea of the hybrid playstyle for this thing. Bunch of ES, bunch of life. Want to fit in Discipline, haven't yet done so. Still potentially could. So that you're kind of a hybrid low life character with more energy shield as more of your primary defensive purpose than life. But this is what we're at right now. Low life, 1600 life and 2300 ES. Using Pain Attunement. The trees like kind of going all over the place. We're trying to get as many masteries as possible that are useful to us thanks to Polymath. Picked up some frenzies, got some crit and accuracy and spells and additional curse. So we're using Assassin Mark and Ellie Weakness. Since we don't need anything to do with chaos, just run Ellie Weakness for the fire portion of the skill. Other than that, nothing else too interesting that needs to be done. We do have, like I said, the Harness the Void Forbidden Flesh and utilizing Balance of Terror. If we've cast Early Weakness, our Glacial Cascade is getting a bit of extra random damage. And if we've cast Despair, which I'm doing purely for just the reason of that Balance of Terror, you get Withered stacked up on the enemy pretty good for our overall Volatile Dead Chaos damage. So just cast Despair anywhere before attacking a boss, and then Early Weakness on the boss, and it should yield some good damage. That's basically the whole character. Don't know if there's anything else I really need to mention. My life is reserved with Precision, Clarity, Defiance Banner, and Arrogance. It's possible to instead fit in like Discipline on life, but then it's tough to kind of balance my mana regen and my accuracy without these doing that sort of hard work, and I can't really do it on mana anymore. This over here is just Early Weakness, Despair, Arcane Surge, and Flame Dash, Mark on Hit, Grace, and Assassin's Mark. That's what the defenses look like without Flasks. With Flasks, bunch of evasion, capped res, decent chaos res, which you will need if you're doing this kind of a setup, and we're going to call that capped spell suppress. So capped spell suppress, yep. And then that's my relic, just some spell damage, cooldown recovery rate, which is nice for a cast on crit build, and for some SpellSlinger potentially as well. The cooldown at the moment is 0.37. And then there's just Pantheons, I guess, which is Solar Brian King and Solar Garrican. That's it for the build for now. Hopefully, if I get to do some endgame, I have an endgame video for you as well. Thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.